Greetings, Earthlings. I come to share knowledge from beyond your world. In just a few easy steps, I will give you the secret to getting rich. You can open up a daycare center just like this one and make a ton of money. No kids needed.
Just kidding.
By now, you've probably seen or at least heard about the viral Nick Shirley video where he's with a man only going by the name of David. They both go out to different daycare centers in Minnesota that were receiving millions of dollars in taxpayer funds. When they got to the location during normal business hours, the place was either closed or the person who answered the door wouldn't take their information nor give out an application or even a brochure.
I would like to see if I could bring little Joey, my son little Joey here. Is there paperwork to kind of check out the daycare? No.
I refuse.
What? Why?
You're like creating a work environment.
But you work here.
This was the case for all but one daycare center who actually did take down their information. One of the places taking the most heat was for a misspelled sign that was the Quality Learning Center. The claim was that there wasn't any kids at the daycare.
So what do you think about this daycare center? They spelled learning wrong. They've received over $1.9 million this year alone, and they're supposed to have 99 children here.
I don't see it.
Have you ever seen any children here?
None at all.
It has to be said that that point was misrepresented in the video. The Quality Learning Center was licensed to serve up to 99 children. Now that doesn't mean the daycare has that many children there at one time. That was the maximum number of children that they could legally have enrolled at one time, ensuring that the facility isn't overcrowded. When state inspectors made a surprise inspection, they did actually find children at the daycare center. And they also found a whole lot of other violations. Now this is where the case gets a little strange. The Quality Learning Center, according to the state of Minnesota, was closed a week prior to talking with the New York Post, but the owners told the outlet that it's up and running. And it looks like they painted the place and brought in some kids and had another YouTuber come in to show off the daycare center. However, as of January 6th, they're closed again. Before it was the Quality Learning Center, it was the Salama Child Care Center, which was raided by the FBI.
Surprise,
Way before Nick Shirley's video ever came into being. State auditors had investigated the alleged daycare fraud when the issue first came up. It was at this point, fingers were pointing in all different directions. Investigators spent several years gathering evidence with seasoned law enforcement. In a special review compiled by the state, an email by Jay Swanson, manager of the investigation unit, was entered into the review, although his claims were not yet vetted at the time. Inspectors claimed that the overall rate of fraud in the program was at least 50%, and this was based off of tips and leads. There were claims of overbilling in which there were so many tips coming in that were likely to be valid, but they couldn't investigate all of them because there was just so many. In this part of the report, it could be a reason as to why some of these daycare centers are so unwelcoming to new clients. As it turns out, you don't come to the daycare comes to you. Here's the juicy part of the report. 6 individuals that were claiming to be representatives of a segment of childcare owners wanted to work with DHS. Their intentions, however, were less than pure. At first, representatives wanted DHS to prohibit CCAP parents from moving their children to different daycare centers, claiming that it would help stop fake payments. When DHS refused, one of the reps actually said, "If we make $50,000 a month, but pay out $30,000 to mothers in kickbacks, we lose profits." After the meetings began with these representatives, someone from the community came to the DHS office and told them that this group of daycare owners were called the Sharks. These representatives were working with DHS in order to gain information, derail investigations, and to gain advanced knowledge of integrity efforts so they can find a way to defeat those. In one meeting, the representatives were demanding the fraud manager's phone number so they can call him and have him shut down other daycare centers that were engaged in alleged fraud. When the office refused, they were less than pleased and continued to repeat the demand several times with no success. Some of those representatives went to another daycare and wanted that owner to join their association. Well, the dues were $1,200 a month or per quarter. The owner couldn't remember, but if he didn't join, they would report him for fraud. In this part of the report, it talked about how there was no minimum stay requirement before the provider can charge for a full day. Investigators had seen mothers come in with their children and then leave 15 minutes later with their kids. Some mothers would stay at the center for a few hours, where mothers would mingle with other mothers and the children all played together. Investigators saw pizza being delivered to the daycare around 6 p.m., having what they called a taxpayer-funded social event. Then the women and children would leave shortly after. The reason for the mother having to be present at the center with her kids was a cultural one, because if the mother is not present with her child, the child wouldn't be fed. Even if a mother is an employee, she will feel no responsibility for feeding other younger children that are not hers, which really defeats the purpose of daycare. According to the email by Jay Swanson, the fraud never stopped. It only got bigger as time went on. While the fraudsters were to blame for some of the fraud really couldn't have taken place without the loose controls that allowed for it to continue and grow. Inspector General Carolyn Ham was placed on paid leave when a complaint was filed against her. She was accused of not speaking nor willing to meet with her investigators, and the investigation itself was taking a long time. In one news story from NPR News, Carolyn said she felt like she was being made into a scapegoat. On the Minnesota Senate Republican Caucus's website, they claim the Office of the Legislative Auditor's report cites Ham's effort to discredit the work of her own investigators, going so far as to use $90,000 of taxpayers' funds to hire an outside consulting firm to examine the investigation unit within her own office. During a legislative committee hearing, Ham made a statement that clearly left the impression that she doesn't trust the investigators that work within her office, although there was no explanation given as to why. During a hearing, Carolyn didn't want to return to her old role as Inspector General. While some called for her to resign, state lawmakers decided to move her to a lower-level position. The hearing ended quietly and no one was held accountable. After the hearing was over, there were supposedly new safeguards put into place. However, the fraud still continued anyway.
The question on everyone's mind is, where did the money go?
Once upon a time, I used to live in this warm, lovely state called Minnesota. And within Minnesota, I was put on Minnesota Care, Minnesota Medicaid. And that Medicaid would pay for my methadone clinic. Not only did they pay for my methadone clinic, it paid for the medical taxi that I took to and from said clinic. Those taxi drivers were all Somalian. I was an addict. I didn't give a shit what was going on. But those Somalian taxi drivers used to have me write fake medical appointments, and they would pay me cash at the end of every month. I was a junkie. I didn't give a shit. So, about 15 years ago, those medical rides, taxis, were driven by Somalians. They would be frauding my Minnesota Medicaid by me writing fake appointments.
Here in Minnesota, a local realtor reached out to me to tell me about another way that Somalians are scamming Minnesotans out of their taxpayer dollars. In her community alone, Somalians have bought up over 455 homes. They buy these homes, claiming they're turning these homes into home health care centers. She says the way we know Somalians have bought these homes is because all of a sudden, extremely nice cars start showing up. Mercedes, BMWs, the nicest cars are parked in the driveway. And she said by law, the state will not come out and inspect these homes and make sure these homes even have clients living in these homes. She also said, as a realtor, she cannot disclose to people wanting to buy homes in this neighborhood that Somalians have bought that home and they're using that as a home health care center.
Honorable Robbins, based on your record before your committee, when did Governor Walz first become aware of widespread fraud in Minnesota social service programs?
I would assume that he has been aware of it since he ran for office for governor in 2018.
By 2017, DHS investigators warned CCAP fraud could exceed 50%. What was that information elevated to the governor's office?
Yes, there was an OLA report.
Oversight Committee is holding its first hearing on the massive fraud in Minnesota's social services program. Minnesota social services, which are funded by you, the American taxpayer, are being ripped off. The most vulnerable are suffering as a result. Federal prosecutors estimate that these criminals have stolen at least $9 billion.
Democrats took money from our kids. Democrats took money from your kids, the kids who need it most, dumped it into fraudulent daycare facilities, and turned the other way when this abuse was reported. This has been their pattern, so this really shouldn't surprise anybody. But what's happening there is absolutely disgusting. Tim Walz can announce that he won't run again for governor, but he will still be held accountable by House Republicans, and that's exactly what we're doing this week in the House Oversight Committee.
Another strange twist to this story is even though the story was televised and reported on, those stories did not receive the viral reaction that Nick's video did. One of the reasons for this is because Nick had help from the GOP. As more fraud continues to get uncovered, ICE agents are in Minnesota. They're raiding businesses along with other law enforcement and seizing records. Around this time, Governor Tim Walz put out the call for Minnesotans to come out and protest the ICE agents.
I want Minnesotans to hear this from me. The desire to get out and protest and to speak up to this administration of how wrong this is, that is a patriotic duty at this point in time, but it needs to be done safely. And I think the commissioner simply just laid out some of those parameters. We can do that. This is the peaceful resistance that we need.
Then this happened to Renee Good. Whatever you might think of whoever was in the right or wrong in this incident, this is being used as fuel for the fire, although some people are choosing to stay out of it.
Our mothers were born here, their mothers were born here, and their mothers' mothers were born here, and therefore we are Americans. We are not going to be out there in the street cheering for everybody else to get dropped like bombs in our neighborhoods, because that's what the Democrats did to us. They took a whole bunch of black and brown looking people and they dropped them in our neighborhoods and thought we wasn't going to notice it.
Hey, to my foundational black people, stay out of it. Mind your business. Don't you go out there helping nobody. Don't join nobody, because this is not your fight. These people are thieves, disrespectful. They hate black American people, and so do the Democrats. They hate black American people.
You